What's up everyone, this is the second and last part of the player list system. If you haven't seen the first tutorial yet, check the video description. And yeah, at the end I will also show you how to turn this into a sorted leaderboard and also how to connect it with my player nametags tutorial. So first of all, we need the game mode. So let's open it. And we're using it because it's running only on the server and is keeping track of different server related stuff, such as whenever a player joins or leaves the server. And we want to make use of that. So getting here, the nodes, event on post login and logout, event on logout. Then we need a new variable, I'll call it all PCs. That should store all our player controllers. And it should be here the variable type player controller. And here set this also up here to array. Then we're getting the all PCs array here and adding an element to it. So adding the new player controller when the player joins the server and when the player leaves the server, we want to remove this item. So you cannot connect this here because this here is of the type controller while this is player controller. These two guys up here are both player controller. But you can simply cast here to player controller because the controller class is a parent class of player controller. And yeah, in the end, this will work here. So connect this. Then we need a new function and I will call it update player list GM. Add it also here that it always gets triggered whenever this array gets updated, either the player is added or removed from the list. So then we can get here the all PCs, get a for each loop. When you hold F and click, you can quickly get this node. Otherwise you can just search for it here. And yeah, basically this here is a loop that is going through all the PCs. But before we continue in here, we want to store the data such as the name or maybe later other stuff like points or kills or whatever in another array. And to keep that organized, we want to create a structure for that. So go here to the content browser, create a new blueprint structure, calling this as_player. And yeah, here we have a Boolean variable by default. I will just rename that to player name and changing this to text as the variable type. I will leave it now just by this one variable in here, but yeah, later we can expand it at, as I said, score or kills or whatever. Good. Now we turn it to game mode and we're adding here a new variable. And we're calling this player list. And setting the type to as_player. Also make sure that it is an array. Then we're taking this. First of all, every time we are updating the player list, we want to clear this array. You could also use a local variable, then you don't need to clear this because like it's local and every time you're calling this empty again. But yeah, maybe nice to have it also outside of this function here accessible. So clearing this player list, then we now want to retrieve the player name from each player and storing this in our array here. So I'm adding an element and making this here. So how can we get now a player name here? Can be different ways based on whatever name setup you have. I will just go now with the default Unreal name. So get player state from here. And from here we can now get player name. Then we can connect this here. So I also made a tutorial about player name tags and made there a different setup for how players can set their names. Yeah, at the end of the tutorial I will show you a way how you can connect this, basically connect the player names with this player list here. From, yeah, we showed it at the end, but now we successfully here should have set up our player list and are now ready to again get here the all PCs array and also again make here a for each loop to then tell every player about this new player list here. So now we need to go to the gameplay PC, and here we need to add a new custom event. I will call it update player list PC. And yeah, if the server or like the game mode here would just calling this event here, it's still executing on the server, because you should know that the PC is running on the owning player and also on the server. So if the server would execute this event, it would still be executed on the server and the player would never get to know about the player list. But if you want to know that the server is executing an event on the PC or on the player, that the player that's triggered actually on the player, then you need to set this custom event here to run on only client and reliable. And also want to add an input here, calling this player list, setting this to as player, changing this to array. And just for testing, we can now get in here for each loop and breaking this and print string of that. So in the game mode, we can now cast to our gameplay PC class. And calling the update player list PC event and connecting this. And I set here the number of players to 2 and the net mode to players client. You can also set it to standalone or to not to standalone. Actually, I will set it to players list server. Yeah. And here you can see now really short the player names. It was more than 2 because it updated also more than 2 times. So everything looked fine. We're getting to know of different player names. And yeah, Now, next up, we wanna also in the player, see, instead of just printing it here, we wanna do that in the UI, like adding these player widgets here. So to do that, we need to go to our UI widget class here, where we are having the player list. And in here, we now need to create also, again, a new function. Call it update player list again. And getting here the input as player, making this an array, calling this player list, and going now to the PC, where we now can get our UI ref and call this update player list. And connect this. So in here, we wanna get our player container. So this vertical box, and this should be a variable. So take that. The first thing we want to do in here is clear children. So it's empty and we can refill it. But before we are doing that, we want to make our player entry widget updatable. So click on that and then on the text block, and we rename this here to text block player name and making this to is variable. Then we can go to the graph, adding here a new variable, and I'm calling this player name. Make sure that the type here is as player. And we want to create a new function and calling this, just call it update, dragging in the player name, making a set out of it here, and connecting it with the update node. So it automatically creates this pin here. Now we're getting our text block and set the text, set text. So this one here we can break and connect it here with the text. And yeah, now we can go back to our UI and say here that we want to get here, make use of here of this array. To make it more organized, we don't have to drag it in here. We can also search here for get player list. And this one is actually then the same here. So we can get this here with the for each loop. And now we want to create a widget. And this is our player entry. And this player entry we want to add to the player container. But before we are doing that, we also want to call here the update node we just created, connecting this here. And adding this, adding here a child to the player container. This here. Now we actually, it should already work, but we have a performance problem, and that is because when you imagine you have like 100 players and all the time they update the score and another player joins, it needs to create each time new widgets. And yeah, the widgets are still remaining in the Unreal world and it's not nice for performance really. So we should reuse our created widgets and just update them. That's much better for the performance. So to do that, we want to store each time we're creating a widget, storing that in an array. And I'm creating here a new variable and calling this all player widgets, and set the type to wb_player entry and making this to an array. And then you can take this here, and after creating, we're adding this also here. Like this. And then each time before we're creating, we're checking, because like we cleared the container with the widgets, and then before creating new ones, we're checking if we have here player widgets. So we're checking here the last index, and then if this here from the loop is bigger than the last index, and if it is bigger, then we're basically creating a new widget, adding this to the array. So next time this whole update function here triggers, we have one more element in the array, and it will go here then next time at this point, or at this loop index, it will go to the false pin. And what we're doing here is updating. So updating this element. So we're getting this array index, and just calling an update in here, also with this array element, and then not to forget add child to the player control. Add this as a child to the player container. Okay, very good. So we're playing now. Here I set the number of players to 2 and the net mode to listen server. You can also set it to as client. But when we are playing now, checking here, we can see the player list. Looks fine. We're taking a look here. It's not updated. When we're closing, we can see two errors, and that is because it didn't have here access to the UI ref. So when we're going here, you might wonder why it didn't have access here, because like this was not set. We are actually setting it here correctly, but when we're going here, actually the game mode triggered this update player list quicker than the own player was able to create its own UI. So this really happens in the first second, or like in the first milliseconds when you start playing. But there's an easy fix you can do. You can check if this UI ref is valid. If it's valid, then it's fine. And if it's not valid, then we want to go again, maybe doing that after 0.1 seconds, and we'll do it again. And I'm sure after the second or third round here, it will then also be fully set up and valid and works. So what we can also do here in the UI, by default, we added these only for testing. So maybe just removing these testing widgets in here, so it's empty by default. Then let's test it another time. Here it still works, and also here it works now. So finally, how to turn this into a leaderboard. I won't implement that now, but I just modified it a bit here and can demonstrate you what I did, and then you can redo it the same if you want. So first in the player controller, I added a new variable called score and set that to replicated. Then on the key input, just for testing, I'm executing a custom event that is set to run on server. And this is just increasing the score and getting the game mode, casting to the game mode, and executing this function that we have already in there, update player list GM. Then I also went here to the structure and added, besides the player name, another variable called score and set that to the type integer. In the player entry widget, I also added here another text by points, and in the graph in our update function, I then set the text to this score value here we're getting from the structure. So now the biggest changes are in the game mode. So here first everything stay as it was, but then here in the for each loop we're getting the score, and from the game, so casting to the gameplay PC, I converted this here to a pure cast, and then setting this here to getting here the score and adding this here to the make node. And yeah, then I add here a sorting algorithm. I won't explain you that now. You can just take a look which variables I added here. This one and these three local variables. I will add this. Actually, I will add this whole function here, update player list GM, in Blueprint UE, so you can just copy and paste it in your project if you want to use it, or you can just take now here a look how I did it and then just rebuild it and maybe understand how it works, like so. And if we're playing, then it looks like this. On the right, we're seeing the score. If I'm pressing the key, it's counting up. If I'm going in the other window and pressing the key, and now another time, and another time, the location switch, and yeah, the position switches, yeah. So that's the sorted leaderboard, and that was almost everything, but I told you at the very end of the tutorial, I also want to show you what small changes you need to do if you want to connect this system or this player list system with my tutorial where I show you how to add player name tags. So let's do that next. For that, you need to go back to your update player list GM function inside the game mode and only changing something up here. So what I did is here getting the control pawn and then doing an isValid check, because at the very beginning it's probably not loaded up already. So if it's not valid, I'm setting a timer by function name and entering the same function name as this here. Just copy that out, so it will repeat this function after 0.2 seconds. And yeah, it's not adding the player then. And if it is valid, we also need to check if this player name variable that we have in the character is also not empty, because if it is still empty, then we want to update it here. So wherever you're setting the the player name in the menu or so, really make sure that the player that it's not accepted if the player wants to go with an empty name, because otherwise it would go here with in an infinity loop with that. Yeah, but if the text is not empty and everything is here loaded, then it will just add the player to the list. And yeah, that should be it. But I would also recommend you in your character, where you're setting this custom player name, that you are there casting to your player controller and setting there another variable that's also storing your player name. So for example, I call this custom player name PC, and then you can get this here and right, plugging this in here, and then you don't need these nodes. Okay, so then you're not bound to your character pawn class anymore, and also can have different classes there, and also looking here in the player controller. I would say that's the much better way. And yes, that was a tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and also join the Discord server, and I'll catch you in the next one.